Welcome to the Art of Growth in our Enneagram panel season on the 9 love languages. This episode is the Enneagram Type 4 panel. If you are enjoying this series and are inspired to pursue more and deeper connections in your life, we've got something awesome coming up. This September starts our next group coaching series on the art of connection. In this 9-week journey, we will guide you collectively to acquire awareness and skills that will enhance connections in your life. Take this opportunity to invest in you, your relationships, and in the community you are a part of. It kicks off the beginning of September, so be sure to go to theartofgrowth.org/group coaching to sign up today before it fills up. And now, today's episode.
All right. Well, welcome to the Type 4 9 Love Languages podcast. We're so excited to have each of you here. Jim and I began talking about connection, and back early in the year, we were thinking through how much loneliness plays a role in the lives of so many people across the country and across the world. Connection seems to be oftentimes the cure to that. It's not the only cure, but it sure helps when you feel like you're having those moments with certain people that are near and dear to you. You feel seen, you feel heard, you feel connected. And our thought was we want to explore this. And so let's have this conversation with the different types and find out how they have those moments of connection, because we've all had them. Many times it's accidental. It's like, oh, wow, we felt amazing together. It was like this moment of connection. And how do we repeat that? And I think this will help us to name some of those habits and practices that we engage in when we do feel connected to one another. So with that said, let's begin by getting to know you. So why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us where you're from.
My name is Amy, and I'm from Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
I'm Heidi, and I'm from Los Angeles.
I'm Steph, and I live in British Columbia, Canada.
I'm Donna, and I'm in Dallas, Texas.
Wonderful. Well, this is really great because we also have a diversity of force here. We have the different instincts represented. And so please feel free to include that in as you're thinking through the questions. So the first question is, how do you seek love? What are the ways you go about seeking love? Good smiles already. It's like, when do we not?
I think when I seek love, I'm mainly looking for a deeply personal connection. It almost doesn't really matter how that person is connecting to me, but I want to know that they truly see me. They truly know who I am. So if someone's giving me a gift, for example, I don't want it to just be a generic gift. I want it to show that they know something about me. Or if I'm having a conversation with somebody, I want them to ask really interesting questions that show they're really getting into my perspective and seeing it from my perspective. Yeah.
I think for me, well, first of all, I just think the word seeking is so interesting because I feel like that is what I spend my entire life. It's just this constant seeking of all kinds of things, and certainly love amongst them. But this just sort of, I wouldn't call it voracious need, but I think I really want to be seen and seen like in a way that and I realize that's, many people say that, especially for us, but like when someone comes to my home and I'm an artist and I have people who come into my space, because that's where I also work as a consultant. And when they come there and it's like I want them to experience what feels like this coming into my world, basically. And when I feel like they've come into my space, it's like, and they get it. Like they get why I paint how I do and why I even dress the way that, like all of those things. It's like it's intentional. It means something to me. And when they see that, and I do the same for other people, it's not just like I feel the same way when I'm at someone else's space. It's like, I guess it's an affirmation. There's this connection that happens there. And then that opens up like such a deeper conversation, basically. So that's one of the probably many ways, but that's probably the most significant, at least at this stage of my life.
Yeah, I relate to things that both Amy and Heidi have said about conversation being a primary way of experiencing love and connection. And there's always my desires for a depth in that, and there's a flow, as you said. There's a reciprocity. It's not simply all going one way or the other, but meaning, depth, authenticity are huge pieces of that. And humor and lightness as well. But it really takes place generally through conversations and being seen and being known. And what speaks love to me is when I feel like someone sees me and sometimes sees the quirkiest part and loves that and relates to that. And that's when I feel really loved.
Yeah, I resonate with those words. Authenticity, seeing, just feeling heard for what I'm saying. I do feel it ironic that the timing of this podcast, I feel like I'm at a point where I'm literally stripping away all of the ways that I've historically sought love. So it's been like every way I've sought it by, how I dress or how I come across in conversations, how I'm perceived, I'm in this stripping place. So I'm actually kind of in this re-knowing of these things, re-exploring these things, I guess that might be a better word, of really just whittling down to the bare bones of who I am.
So some awareness that has to take place, apparently that's taken place for you, of recognizing how you're going about doing the seeking of love. And so that sounds interesting. So you're naming those things like the way I dress, the way I speak. Yeah. What are some other things because that gets really granular when we start talking about, in what ways am I actually doing it? What are the behaviors behind that? Yeah. I'd like to hear more from you, Steph, and then the rest of you as well.
Well, I think one of the ways that I have sought love is basically looking to other people to affirm who I am. So be that how I am in conversation, how I look. I guess it's almost like how messy can I get, and will people still mirror back? What I'm hoping I'll see is like I said to my partner earlier today, it's like this dichotomy. It's like there's a part of me that I love for the artistic, crazy, messy, dark heart, but then I'm still looking outside of myself to affirm that, even though there's a part of me that actually I like myself, but I still need that affirmation. So then if I'm going out with people in these deep, one-to-one conversations where I'm like bearing my soul and then seeking that kind of mirror back of love. But the fact of the matter is, if I don't see myself first, I need to see who I am first. So that way I'm not looking outside of myself for that love. That makes sense? So I guess it's that external, I've been looking for mirrors, but all those ways I'm looking to be mirrored, I'm like trying to get rid of those. How do people respond to my style? How do people respond to my songwriting, my vocals, just how I am in a group? It's like, just strip it all away. Just see what's there.
I appreciate your vulnerability. Like you went into the 10-foot pool, 10-foot side of the pool. So I appreciate that. Amy, what were you going to say?
That I was just realizing that sounds so familiar to what I do. It almost feels like it's testing relationships, testing people. It's this push-pull because I definitely don't mind opening up to complete strangers. But then once I get to a certain point of the relationship, I can get a lot more tentative. If I put some of myself out there, I see how they respond. And if they don't accept how I'm putting myself out there quite the way I want, then I pull back. And they might not see what I'm doing or what's going on. I don't really explain that. They might just experience kind of a strong, almost like I'm a wave of my personality coming out, and then might all of a sudden experience like a wall. And they might have no idea why that happened.
That sounds very familiar. I feel like a bobblehead the entire time. I'm just like, but it's true. I mean, it's really true. And it's interesting. I actually was having a whole conversation today. Well, I've talked to my husband about this. Like we went over kind of these questions that you had given. And then I'm up here with a friend of mine who's a 2. And it was so interesting because we have sort of some parallel things, and I've known her since high school, but then also some things where we just really diverge, and the things that you were saying are where we diverge, because like that constant feel of forward and back and forward and back and forward, and the constant calibration, sort of how much do I say, how much, I do want to share, and I do want to invite people to share with me and to feel like it's a safe space. But then it's continually, then I'm like, oh God, did I go too far? Oh no, did I say that, and it always does feel like, again, back to the word, like it feels like I'm seeking. It's this continual seeking, and whether it is affirmation, whether it is like a confirmation. And I think that is why then I do withdraw, because sometimes it's just easier. I mean, it's harder in some ways because then I'm just in my head, but it also is easier because I'm not continually like waiting for a response and having, that sort of actual interaction.
Well, you said seeking, affirmation, or confirmation. I get affirmation. What do you mean by confirmation?
Like sort of along the same lines, but it's more like, it feels more embodied almost or something. It's this kind of like, it's more solid. Like affirmation feels a little bit more sort of nuanced, and that's something where it's like confirmation feels sort of like solid. Like that feels more like something I can move forward with. Like what's nice about being married to an 8 is that I don't have to be constantly wondering what he's saying. I don't have to, or wondering what he's thinking rather. I don't have, it's like, I know exactly what he's saying. I may not always like it. In some ways, it's like, it's so much easier because in so many of my relationships, it's that continual, and these are people I've known for literally, 30 years, like very good friends, like people who love me, who will never, and I'm still like, I get off the phone, I'm like, oh, did I say the thing? Did I, and so it just feels, well, again, it just kind of feels exhausting, but yes.
No, but so what's the confirmation? What is it confirming? Like, what are you seeking to be confirmed?
I don't know. It feels more solid. Like there's something that feels like, okay, like they get me, like they get it. And maybe it's too similar to affirmation to really distinguish between the difference. But I guess that's kind of how it's.
So the way I'm seeing it is kind of like how you're describing it. It almost sounds like affirming is something that they're giving to you, maybe a temporary acceptance of what you're putting off. But then confirmation is like an internalized what they have decided about you.
That totally makes sense to me. Yeah, because I agree. I feel like affirmation does feel, it could be temporary. It could be, and it's like continually almost requiring that or wanting it or something. Whereas confirmation feels a little bit more like, okay, I can move on from that. And I'm not saying I feel confirmed in a lot of ways, but that is something that I have felt before. And it's like, and it does feel like that's a chapter I can close a little bit more than the other things.
Is there something that somebody does that feels confirming? Can you give an example? Because I'm sure there's people out there going, I've got a type 4, partner or friend, and I want to make sure I do that. What does that look like? Or is it something that you just experience yourself?
It's probably what I experience, but I think what it is when I guess it goes back to feeling like someone really gets who I feel like I am really deep down. Yeah, who I feel like I am sort of at the depths of my, sort of soul, and I feel like that's why I am in the relationship that I am with my husband, because I feel like he gets that. Like I am confirmed by him, which I never felt that before. Like, when I was younger and I had, several kind of long-term relationships, I never felt that kind of feeling of confirmation and I suppose on some level it feels like safety too.
Yeah. Well, I know that I know that at least for your husband and for other partners of 4s, when they consistently remind you, like, I like you as you are, with all your quirks, with all your weirdness, with everything else, right? There's a difference between blowing smoke at you, where it might feel good, but it doesn't really stick, versus the person's like, I don't have much to say other than I'm in. Yeah. I'm all in with you. I see you. I love what you are, but there's a solidity. Yeah. And where it matches with the word you were describing, sort of that solidity internally, that it's like this person's not going away. And for a 4, I know many of you, I've heard this from many 4s, it's always the testing to see, is that relationship going to go away at some point? And if I reveal more about myself and I reveal the real ugly, like you haven't even tasted of the real ugly, wait till I show you that part. Will you still be around? Yeah.
so a long time ago, I went through a season of depression that was really difficult. And my husband's also a type 8. And so he would say to me, I'm not going anywhere. And that really didn't hit it for me in an interesting way in light of what you're saying. And so, and it was from a good heart and love. But what I heard in that was, but I could, and it would be within my right and reason to do that because where you are. And so finally I said, that's not helping me. And he said, well, what would help you? And I said, to say you're funny. And for me, that goes back to the I see you, I enjoy you, and your uniqueness, the depth of who you are. And so that's become kind of code for us too. That means I love you in some ways. We say that too. But you're funny is, again, in this essence of who you are.
Yeah, but that makes a ton of sense because in one sense, a person can be just sort of a rock and you can sit on that rock, you can stand on that rock. That's fine. But in another sense, this is like, no, this is more than just being there for you. It's I see you. And the I see you is oftentimes for heart types in particular, like a real, really meaningful. So
and maybe we, in some ways it's wonderful to have the rock and the hero and whatever. And sometimes, but it's like, but I could decide not to be that. It says something about just that desire to be seen and loved in the lowest times, but also seeing your beauty in that.
I think what comes to mind hearing everyone talk is just like that confirmation, to use that word, that you're not too much. Like that all the parts of yourself, like the dark places, the messy places, and I think that's a part of the test, at least for myself. It's like, and even in relationship, like you mentioned, Amy, that you put a little piece out there, is that too much? And then it's that kind of thinking back, oh God, did I say too much? Did I basically for myself, I've been learning to not strip down naked and, straight away, sort of, metaphorically speaking in conversation. It's like, I don't have to, because I desire authenticity and I desire depth as the sexual one-to-one, whatever term is used for that. Just learning that I love that intensity, but I can go slow and steady wins the race sort of thing. And trying to learn how to do that. Like I can have a conversation with a friend and she can share something a little deep and I don't have to just jump on it. I can talk a little bit about it and see where she takes that with me. And, if she wants to lighten it up, just lighten it up. It don't have to stay in that dark, deep, heavy place, this slow and steady, and learn that that's okay. And that's authentic too. It's like that can be just as deep in a different way.
Yeah, that's growth. That is not natural.
No.
I get it. Yeah, no, I just celebrate where I see growth because that's just really difficult for all of us to grow past the ego. And it's the way our type is there to defend us. It is going to keep defending us. And we've got a certain pattern and strategy that we use and we go to that all the time. And so, yeah.
So my coach asked me an interesting question today, and that was, what is the relationship for me between authenticity and hiddenness? Which I had never really thought about. And in some ways, they seem sort of opposed. And yet thinking about how I don't think they are. And I'm a self-pres. So hiddenness is probably easier for me in some ways. So sometimes it can be a defense, right? And it can be a way of pulling back. But also it can be a way, maybe to your point, Steph, of kind of calibrating in some ways that desire for, authenticity and leaning into that so much. And on the protection side, I think sometimes because of that desire to be so authentic, so truly authentic, I go to hiddenness to realize what sort of kind of authentic is, or authentic in certain ways. And so again, finding that way of this is authentic, I'm still fully me, but it's not the fullness of me.
Yeah, that's excellent. This is the shift for a lot of fours towards recognizing authenticity is not what I'm feeling in the moment versus what I was feeling yesterday in the moment. But it's also like, well, that is a version of authenticity, of course. But it's also like, can I be authentic to my deeper values as well? Because I have those too. And those tend to have a little bit more sustaining power to them. But yeah, I think that's fantastic. Thank you for that.
One other thing before we moved, still about the seeking love thing, where I realized when I was really thinking about all this, it's like I have, a very secure, lovely relationship, and I have a handful of very, very close friends that I feel very connected to and vulnerable with and all of that. But I think realizing the fact that I lead with social has made me realize why it never feels like there's always a continual search outside of that also, where it's this, but what about that group? Or like I have such a thing about social media, and like when I've had to put stuff out on Instagram or whatever, and I very much feel it's like this, I want to share and I want to put it out there, and then I'm like, oh dear God, why on earth did I do that? I want to rip it back and delete it and throw it away and never talk about it again. And I hated that process when I was putting stuff up relatively regularly, because even though I didn't want to have to think about it, and even though I didn't want to be checking who liked it, who commented, who all of that, it was so hard to pull myself out of that, of just sort of well, I know that, the people around me love, me, love the work that I create, blah, blah, blah. But then, well, what about everyone else? And this continual. So I think that has been an interesting process, I guess.
I really resonate with that as a social 4 as well. It feels maybe like it's a lot harder to be satisfied, because if I could just focus my energy on one particular relationship and really invest in that, then maybe I wouldn't need to look as hard elsewhere. But I almost just I just want to keep growing my circle of friends and influence and relationship. But then if I go too far, I feel like I'm spreading myself too thin. And I want depth in each and every one of those areas. And it's just impossible. You can't invest in that many relationships at once. So I feel like I'm never quite satisfied in each individual relationship.
I love the way the instinct works counter in that respect to your type. Seeking depth and seeking breadth. It's both. It's like, this is really hard work for social 4. But I imagine it's the same for each, the other two here, you, Steph, as a sexual and Donna as a self-pres. It's the domain in which you're doing your 4-ness, and that will never be satisfied, right? The domain itself, social, feels unlimited because it's broad, but sexual feels unlimited because of its depth. And self-pres, it feels unlimited because of the constant attention to that space as well, and the protection of the self inside connections with other people. So just maybe one thing from both of you in terms of how does the depth work itself out through that instinct?
I think I satisfy a lot of the need for depth, and this isn't about relationship, in my head, through books, in my inner world. In terms of relationship, I do seek the love and connection a lot in my family, which creates its own challenges. It's a smaller world, it's a smaller pod, and with really different types of people. And for me, though, there's the push-pull that I feel, that desire for connection through depth. And that sometimes for me, moving out, putting myself out there, and depending on how I'm doing, one of my favorite books is called She Got Up Off the Couch. And so sometimes for me, it's, I got to get up off the couch, and I can, if I'm paying attention, I can see what's going on in my inner world in terms of how I'm doing by whether I reach out or not. And so there's this I feel the real differentiation in energy sometimes. Like someone could probably say, a good friend could say a lot about me just by the fact of, I haven't heard from you for this, this period of time, or I have, and it really has to do with kind of the flow of energy within me. And so for me, I have that, I think, deep desire for connection. I know I do, and longing around that, but I have to kind of surmount my own sort of limitations to get out there and do it.
Yep. And there's, again, the instinct and the way it works against the type. So yeah, excellent.
I get that depth. I'm very close with my partner. He's incredibly deep. He's a 9. Our poor kids are constantly like, when are you guys going to stop talking? But I've operated a lot in self-pres, just because of my history. So I feel like I resonate a lot with what Donna had to say. I would say I've moved a lot. So the friends that I do have are either in another country or another city. Those would be my very close friends. And so I will connect with those friends, but usually it's kind of that depending on what's going on internally, right? So if I'm working through a lot, I'll turtle inward and I really just get that depth from my partner.
Yeah, that's consistent with sexual types because it's that need for depth in the people that they're already connected to, not so much looking for new, but looking for depth in what they have, which again, in all three cases, you can overdo the instinct. So in pursuit of that love, like I'm needing love, and this is how I go about seeking it is through this domain, through that domain, and, the instincts being the domains. And then, realizing we're never getting satisfied by doing that. So, yeah. All right, let's talk about the ways we resist love. What comes up for you? It's so funny because I've had some respond with like, I never resist love. I'm always seeking love. But there is a certain resistance that happens for all types and even heart types, even fours. In what ways do you resist the love that's coming your way?
I always think of that, like the codependency with deficient narrative that I am lacking. And I think that lacking narrative means that I don't let the love that's there in, because that codependent identity with something is wrong and it doesn't let the love that's there sink all the way in.
So there's a bit of an interesting contradiction, which I love. I love contradictions, is codependent, which sounds like you're dependent on something, and at the same time, a resistance.
Yeah.
So explain that.
Well, it's that shame-based identity, right? It's that desire to be unique, but it's the pain that's caused you that desire to be unique, right? It's the rejection that, it would be rejection and pain that I'm like, well, I must be unique somehow. And so then that becomes my identity. And then I become codependent with that identity so that when something healthy comes along, I can't let that health in because I'm too codependent with my identity of being less than or lacking or the one with pain. So the idea of being healthy, allowing something healthy in, something that's ordinary, you reject it.
Did you just swear? Did you just use the curse word?
I did a forced swear. I said the word ordinary. God forbid. It's this weird catch-22 that you're in because you so desperately long for this love that you reject because of this codependent narrative that you're deficient. Yeah. It's just...
Yeah. It's when you want such a depth of love, I feel like I have to be deserving of that love. If I'm only going to accept a small amount of love from someone, then it's okay if I'm having, a bad day or a bad season. But if someone's really prepared to love me the way I want to be loved, then it's almost this pressure. Well, I have to become lovable then. There's this belief in myself that I'm not lovable just as I am. I have to get there. I have to work to get there.
I have never heard that. So this is so fascinating. So love comes your way. Someone thinks you're amazing and wants to be, and now you have to prepare to. Now you have to earn that. You have to somehow deserve it.
Yeah, it sucks.
You say that yeah, that's like, what's strange about that? But none of our personalities are rational. So yeah, no, I love it. That's really, really insightful. I'd love to hear others and either reactions to this or the ways you resist.
It's interesting now because once again, I'm in a, very happy marriage, but, when I was in my 20s and that constant sort of seeking of, it was a whole different situation. And I was very much in this, if the guy was interested in me, I kind of pretty quickly was not all that interested because they just weren't that interested. There was something about that it felt too easy. It felt too boring. There was just something about it where I was like, and probably on some level, there was also a little bit well, if you think I'm that great, what's wrong? What's happening there with you to think that in the first place? But I constantly was in this space of, which is ridiculous, but of either sort of seeking this unavailable person or someone who is in so much need of almost like guys who needed redemption in some way. Like maybe they were sort of like the bad boy or they were the, and it was very much this like that if I was able to like heal them, change them, whatever it was, then that would be proof of basically how much they loved me kind of. Or if, someone who was available for whatever reason then broke off with, the person that they were with to be with me, then I was like, oh, well, there you go. That's proof. And so, which I realized like that's horrible, but it was like proof to me. I had some very tumultuous relationships in my 20s, partly because they were more interesting and they were like, had more texture to them and they were made me feel more sort of like alive. When I dated super lovely men who just loved me, I was like, there was just something where there was something lost there that wasn't so, but I got myself in a situation with a guy that, had a bunch of challenges, PTSD from the Gulf War. Like, he was a very complicated person and I didn't know how to extricate myself really. It was a very hard relationship to kind of get myself out of. And when I did, I knew that like, I just didn't want to be with anyone for a while and I needed to go down. It felt like very much this like Persephone sort of like into the underworld, kind of like into the depths and kind of like getting to a space where I healed myself by myself without, needing a guy, another person to sort of, and it was very much an internal journey. And it wasn't until I came out of that and I had a lot of health problems that kind of, I think, came out of just the sheer stress of, that situation. And when I was then healed, then I was ready to have, not healed in all ways, but at least healed and ready for a romantic relationship that was real and that was, turned out to be really beautiful and someone who really did see me, like actually see me, like really and truly see me. And, our relationship is so great in part because we have so much to laugh about and he'll be able to pull me out of my, depths of despair a lot of times by humor. Anyway, so that to me was how that so I was seeking, I think I was resisting love because I was resisting people who actually were willing to give me love. But I think it was partly because I didn't feel like they really got me anyway. So I think that was part of it to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah. That's part of the authenticity too for fours. It's like, if there's too much positive praise without recognition of the reality of, brokenness, then you don't really see me. So it's sort of like, I see you, I see your brokenness, I still like you. So Donna, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think about the word resistance and then I also, so I think about the ways that I resist love and then I think about the ways I miss it. And I wouldn't have had this maybe same perspective without the instinct of knowing self-preservation. But I think the love that I resist is when I feel swallowed up. And to me, that sounds consistent with the self-pres instinct in some ways. So love that feels overpowering or that kind of comes into the space maybe that I create and protect myself with, I'm not sure. But I think that's where I resist. I think more often I miss it. And it's not an act of resisting. It's that it's not in my language. I miss the fact that it is love. And I end up feeling less loved and lonely. And I'm missing the ways that whether it's family or friends are actually actively loving me, but I'm just missing it.
Yeah. Oh, I love that you said that. That's the nuance that was necessary in that question, because I think the resisting love question is an active awareness and resistance of love, as opposed to, I don't even see it. So that's why I'm missing it. Really good. Thank you for pointing that out. Let's continue on that, since it's like, I don't even see it. Let's continue on. Say, what are some thoughts here about that?
So we have a daughter in her mid-20s who's neurodivergent. And so the way that she communicates love to me is so different than how I long to feel love from my daughter.
Yeah.
So, my way would be around connection and a kind of connection. So around conversation and depth and many things. And that's not the way that she's wired, and it's not the way she communicates love. And so the both and of it's okay to feel, to feel the longing, and sometimes to feel grief in our relationships, and to not want to miss the ways that she loves me.
Oh, well said. That's the secret sauce. It's the acceptance of this sucks. I hate it. It hurts. And there's love coming my way. So yeah, beautiful. Thanks for sharing that.
I think that's a really good point to bring up. It's like something to really ponder. It makes me think my drive to be seen in the unique way can make me miss the ways, let's say, like my partner will step up and be there for me. And he's just constant. He's just there. And I can miss that because I'm just wanting to be seen as being unique or seen in that unique way.
Yeah.
And learning a different way, I guess, to like be aware of how love shows up in the normalcy of the day, the ordinary ways, right?
What you said in there, it sounds like it's that awareness to shift your attention from what is not here to what is here.
I think just in saying the willingness to look at the ordinary and see it, instead of just looking for love in the unique ways.
Yeah.
How can I see it in the ordinary ways?
Yeah, no, that's dead on. And that's true for all 9 types. That's why I get really excited about that statement, is because for all 9 types, there is a particular way that we have determined love is going to come to me. And it's unconscious, but it's our protective way of saying, I still need it, right? I still need love, even if I'm in my preserving brain. So how do I do that? Well, this is the way that's the safest. And for you, for fours, it's through uniqueness. But one of the questions that's been helpful to me has been, in what ways is your partner loving you right now that you are not noticing or seeing or receiving? And that's been a game changer for me, because it doesn't take me more than a minute to think of, oh yeah, she does this, she does that, she does the other thing. Do I actually receive that in as love, or how do I respond to it? Do I feel guilty because she's doing all these things and I'm not? And so therefore I have a guilt response rather than a receptive response. I mean, it's all sorts of things that I think become, resistors to love, or just not seeing it as we just mentioned, missing and resisting.
For me, it feels like there's an in-between space between recognizing it and accepting the love from someone else, because I think the deeper I go into a relationship, the more I learn to recognize the ways that they're showing me love. But that's when I have to come to terms with, am I resisting this or not? And I think often I do want to resist the love that they're showing me if it's not in the way that I would prefer to receive it. But specifically, if I've made it clear to them. I think there's a bit more leniency towards people who don't know me as well. But the further I go into a relationship with someone, the more I almost expect them to read my mind. Or if we have had an explicit conversation, like, I would really prefer it if you did this. If then they continue to speak their own love language more, then I almost take that as an insult. Like, but if you really want to show love to me uniquely, then that might look differently than how you would want to give it. Like, it almost feels like love, like showing love to someone depends on how they want to speak it. Like the act of translating your love language to someone else's language is an act of love in and of itself, I think.
And not an easy thing to do, because the translation between our love languages is like 2 different languages altogether. Yeah, very much.
Oh, it just makes me think that my partner can say lots of loving things towards me and really speak into me. But if I'm not seeing that in myself, I won't even receive it from him.
Oh, that's 100% true.
So I'm learning the ways to see myself so that I can then receive love.
Yes.
Because otherwise it's like, it just falls flat. And people can say all the beautiful, nice, kind things. They can be seeing me in all the ways I need to be seen. But if I can't see myself, it just falls on deaf ears, really.
Mm-hmm. I wish there was an easier way to say that. I've been trying to find one, because that is the key right there it's true for me as well, but particularly for other referencing types, like heart types. It's like you have to turn to yourself. And you have to have the ability to see yourself as lovable for then the love to come in and land, right? Sort of like creating a bottom to your container. Because if you don't have a bottom to your container, it doesn't matter how much affirmation comes your way, you'll still be thirsty and hungry for it the next day, and the day after that. And so that's where the metabolizing of love starts to take place. But it begins, as you've said, with that, do I see myself that way? And am I treating myself in a way that is, that is loved? Do I have that sort of love disposition towards myself? So yeah, really good. Boy, this is turning out to be I can't believe this is a free podcast. All right. Go to third question. In what ways are you learning to receive love? What are some stories, some practices around that? You're in the process of doing your work. You've done a lot of work on your type, on yourself. So there are ways you are receiving love. Let's talk about that.
The flip side of what I was saying before is like, if I'm expecting someone else to translate into my own language, then I have to be willing to do the same. So I'm learning to recognize what someone is doing is actually loving me. And I'm learning to accept that for what it is, that no one's ever going to be so committed to showing me love that they're like going to keep track of every single nuance. And even if they did, it's not really attainable because my own standards are not going to be realistic enough. So I guess the imperfection of love, I'm learning to take whatever is given to me and use that as building blocks to deepen the relationship rather than expecting that depth right from the beginning.
I love that. The imperfection of love. That's really, really good. Yeah. That's all part of the receptivity, what you just named. It's like, it's the ability to take it in requires you to be able to see it and then actually receive it, as opposed to when you're seeking it out and demanding it comes a certain way. I'm not sure that ever actually satisfies us.
I think I spent, again, more time when I was younger in this sort of space of, first of all, I was an obsessive reader and, loved stories and everything where I could totally, nothing made me happy, ironically happier than like a very, sort of like this unrequited love story about the, and everything had such, sort of darkness to it. And it seemed so beautiful. And then to compare that to sort of like real love, again, it just felt so lame sort of comparatively because I wanted to be this big sort of theatrical, beautiful production or whatever. And then, my husband and I, many years ago, and he thinks that I'm the one that said it to him. And I thought he said it to me, but whoever said it, has stuck with both of us. But about love being a verb. I mean, of course, we're talking about how are we receiving love, but it's also very much like part of that is my willingness to love, so then it is this, I feel like especially having these sort of romantic ideas of love when I was younger, it was just this sort of like, sort of like a dream world. It didn't really exist. And so it wasn't, where actual love and staying with someone for a long time and really seeing them and understanding them and being willing to love them even when they're super frustrating, or I know that I can't even stand being around myself, that I don't know how they could stand that, because I do think I really had a hard time knowing how to receive love, again, just that feeling of sort of lack. So I didn't quite understand why someone would love me. And I think it's partly that love is a verb thing, and knowing the importance of like having, a son who's in high school, and I'm, child of divorced parents, and that I would love for my son to see parents that, have worked on it, that argue, that, a dynamic of, and I'm a 4 and he's an 8. There's a lot of energy there. And so, and to have, but that's love. I mean, that's partly how we love one another because we are passionate, I guess. Yeah. For me, this isn't just like a fantasy. This is actually like real life. And I think also, so much of I know for all of us, but like a journey of just like, who am I? Like, very much this, like, who am I? What are my gifts? How am I? What is my purpose? Like, what am I sharing with the world? And as I have come closer to this idea of, and it will be a never ending journey for me because again, I'm always in that seeking space, but to be in a space where I feel like I love what I do enough and I'm seeing the value in what I'm creating and I'm helping others, it's then made me feel like I am more worthy of love because I understand who I am more deeply, I guess.
I think when it comes to authenticity. It feels like if we're not showing love how we would authentically want to show love, then it's not real or it's not authentic. Like that it should be a spontaneous response, that love should come in the moment. It shouldn't be scripted. You shouldn't have to work too hard at it. But I think what comes with that is that your growth is stunted. You can't go too deep if you just let it stay in the moment reacting. But if you do something that doesn't necessarily feel natural at first, you're taking the long road to actually building a far greater depth and a far truer love, I think.
I was listening to a podcast. It was around the idea that everyone is doing the best they can. And so I really just kind of sitting with that. My parents are just doing the best they can, right? With the tools they've been given, and so how they love me as their daughter that they don't really understand. I can choose to go, they're doing the best they can. And so that helps me to receive the love that they're offering me because I know that they're just doing the best they can with the tools that they have. And so if I can start to see that way with all of the people in my life, with my friends, the friends that maybe don't respond how I want them to, they're just doing the best they can because maybe I have a lot of 9 friends, my partners and I, or maybe they're just in a phase where they are not looking after themselves and they're going in on themselves and they're doing the best they can. And so that's allowed me to receive love in ways that historically I might not have been able to because I've made it less about me in a sense and more about where they're at and what their capacity is. So that's one kind of thought around there. And another way I've been able to receive love is having people in my life, like my partner that I trust. He's able to mirror the beautiful parts of my soul to me. And so the parts that, like I said earlier, I knew were there, that I wanted to believe were there, and I kept looking in all the wrong places to have that confirmed in me. But to actually have someone who can confirm those parts of me, that is willing to go the distance and do the work, and I can trust that mirror. So when I can trust that mirror and internalize that, it then deepens and strengthens me seeing me, which then gives me the confidence to be able to receive love in other ways.
Very good.
Well, my husband and I will be married 30 years this year and are still really actively working at learning how to give and receive love in ways that to each of us, because we're very, very different. And I wouldn't have had the Enneagram language to use. I have more of it now. For him, it's bringing up his heart more and connecting more with his heart, which is huge, difficult work for anyone. And for me, it is one, I think, releasing some of my specific desires around that. And for me, it's been about really bringing up the body in some ways and being more in touch with that. And about 10 years ago, we started dancing. We started ballroom dancing together, which is the best thing we've ever done. And was a challenge for me from just an opening up, and freeing myself in many ways. And so when I get off this call, we have a space in our house that we dance. And so we are going to go dance. And it is, I think about, it's like building the widest possible bridge to each other. And it's a place where we meet, where the fun, which we both love, the fun and the music and all the things, and laugh and play. And then I think also opens up those spaces for emotional connection and desire to then continue to grow in the ways that are most challenging and most difficult. But it's a journey.
Wow. Did you come up with that? The widest possible bridge?
I just came up with that.
That is such a great line. Oh, man. Oh, man. Widest possible bridge. What a great metaphor for relationships. Like, where can you both dance in a space that's wide enough to hold both of you? That's just, brilliant. Well, To each of you, thank you so much. This has been richer than rich and deeper than deep. And I've so enjoyed it that it's fed my own soul in doing this. And my hope is that this is a gift to our community for all the type 4s out there and people in relationship with type 4s, that this is just a beautiful gift and a way for us to all collectively learn how do we connect better. And so I deeply appreciate each of you for doing that and for opening up, as I said, so vulnerably and so openly with our community. Thank you so much to each of you.
Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope this work of art helps you grow. Reach out to us at www.theartofgrowth.org to find out about the upcoming group coaching session, to take our free Enneagram or Instincts test, learn about individual and couples coaching, as well as our next round of certification. If you would like to see how our work can improve your corporate culture and team dynamics, email us to set up a free consultation. You can follow us on Instagram at just Art of Growth, and make sure you follow the podcast. And leaving us a review on iTunes really helps people find this work. Until next time, my friends, grace and growth.